Okay, so I would like to take a minute to acknowledge that I do have the privilege and honor to work, study, and live in a region south of the Fraser River, which overlaps with the unceded traditional and ancestral lands of the Kwantlen, Musqueam, Patsy, Semiahmoo, and Quitlam peoples. And I would also like to remind everyone, if you don't know, that Kwantlen means tireless runner. So thank you everyone for coming to today's presentation of more or less Resume Tips 101 to get you prepped and ready for the upcoming job fair for next week. But before we hop into that, I'd like to just talk a little bit about KPU Career Development Center and we have available to students and KPU alumni. One thing on through Advisor Connect, you can make an appointment for a one-on-one coaching appointment for anything job search or career planning related. So please use that resource. It is there for you to use. We also have resume review where you upload your resume and usually it's me having a look at it. I put a few edit suggestion comments on it and then email it back to you. We also through Career Connection have exclusive job postings. So that's where job postings come directly from the employer. And there's also on-campus positions available on Career Connection as well. Career Connection is also where you can go for any workshop signups, as well as tons and tons of job search and career planning resources. So please be sure to sign up and use Career Connection during and after your time with KPU. There's also virtual drop-ins available on Tuesdays from 2 till 3 p.m. and Thursdays from 10 a.m. till 12 p.m. So that's through Microsoft Teams. There's a link there. You just click on it during that time. If you have a quick question that you don't want to sign up for a one-on-one coaching appointment with, just go ahead and click on one of those links and then you can have a drop-in. And then, of course, the KPU Career Development Center also hosts job fairs and career fairs. And so that one, of course, our most recent one is coming up, Get Ready, Get Hired next week. Which brings us to a few of the events leading up to Get Ready, Get Hired. Of course, today you're here for the resume webinar. Tomorrow we have Interview Your Way to a Job Offer, same place, same time with me. Relationship building is on Wednesday. That's relationship building, also known as networking. I hear some chatting there. Does everybody have their microphones on mute? And if not, is there something that someone needs to say? Okay, I think we're good. No worries. So on Wednesday we have Get Ready, Get Hired. Sorry, that relationship building, also known as networking, is on Wednesday, same place, same time, 12 till 1 p.m. On Thursday, we have Navigating the Virtual Job Fair. So that'll help you out for the big event, which is on Wednesday, September 22nd, the Get Ready, Get Hired Virtual Job and Volunteer Fair. On Friday, we have Resumania. So that's where you can get your resumes critiqued in real time. What we ask is that there's a link on the KPU website, but what we ask is that you send us your resume ahead of time so that we have it. And then it's, of course, going to be held via Teams as well. All right. What we'll be doing, because it's a webinar format, I think what's probably best is that we, I go through the information and then at the end, we're going to have a spot, a bit of time rather available for questions. So hold on to your questions, write them down. It could be that as I move through the webinar, I answer that question, but if not, just hold on and I'll be opening things up to questions at the end of the webinar. Okay, so here's what we're going to review today. So I'm going to move through the first three topics relatively quickly, spend a little bit more time on on topics 4 through 7. So what is a resume? What is its purpose? Why do you even need one? Also going to quickly review resume formats. So there's 3 primary formats, but there's one in particular that employers like. So we're going to be covering that as well. A few tips around what does make an effective resume. So what are of course we're going to be going through formatting and all that good stuff. Number 4 is where we're really going to start to delve in pretty deep. So I'm going to review with you each of the pretty standard, pretty typical resume sections. I'm going to provide examples of what those sections really ought to look like. And of course, we can't have a resume webinar without accomplishment statements. So of course, we'll be covering that. How to read or how to deconstruct a job posting as well in order to get you past the bot and into the office or at least the e-office of a real person for an interview. Putting into practice. So a lot of people ask me the question, really, Chantal, do I have to customize each and every time? And I say, yes, yes, you do. But here's how. So we're going to cover that as well. Applicant tracking systems. So we'll cover that. The automatic, it's software essentially that employers use. I'm guessing you've more or less heard of those as well. Wrap it up. Questions, and that'll take us to the end of the webinar. Okay, so here's something that I just learned the other day. September is International Update Your Resume Month. It's a thing. Who knew? But it makes sense because September, it's fall, right? Everyone's coming back from summer and people are getting ready to really, look for new talent and look for new jobs. So kind of makes sense. But it also comes at a good time. So what is a resume? It's a professional document and it's highlighting your education, your skills, your work experience, and your accomplishments. All right, and the purpose, there's a few purposes to a resume, but for the sake of today's webinar, it's to get you an interview. Right? The resume is not going to get you the job. The resume is going to get you the meeting with the person that's going to offer you the position. And then just for fun, I put a few little hashtags there. Why not? Relevant, customize, I'm awesome, and don't put your reader to sleep. Okay. So here are the 3 primary resume formats. I'll start with the one that's pretty standard, pretty typical, and that's the chronological style. So in fact, it should technically be called reverse chronological because this goes for all resumes. The information really needs to be for each section from most recent to oldest. So it's a reverse chronological. It's a pretty standard style where essentially you tell the employer early on in the document your work experience, your education, any volunteer experience you have. You don't spend a whole lot of time focused on skills. You spend most of your time focused on your work experience or your education and so forth. So while it is a relatively popular one for employers, some job seekers don't love using this format because it doesn't always work super well if you are transitioning from one career type into something else. That's where we might see someone want to use the second kind of resume format, which is called a functional format. And it's exactly like it sounds. It kind of focuses on your function and it kind of downplays your actual work experience. So it's generally with a true functional style, we see someone might start off talking about their specific skills that they have that they think are relevant for the employer. And then kind of lower down the page, we might see a very brief summary of their work experience with no information other than the title of the job they held, the company, and the date. There's no description because they're really selling their skills and they're downplaying their work experience. This is a confusing resume style. It was quite popular in the 90s, but it's confusing for employers, and oftentimes they know what they're looking at. So a recruiter knows if they get a functional style that it's probably because the candidate does not have relevant work experience, or they have gaps in their work experience that they're trying to hide. But recruiters know this stuff. So they prefer not to receive resumes in this format. In fact, some places will downright put them in the no pile. So that brings us to the third style, and that's the combination style. And what we have here, it's again pretty self-explanatory. It's a combination of the chronological and the functional. So what we might see with a combination resume is we might see kind of a skill summary up at the top. Then we might see either their work experience clearly listed with some details in terms of what they did, what they accomplished in each of those roles, then maybe their education section, or maybe their volunteer section. The order of it really does depend on who you're giving your resume to, and we'll cover that in a little bit more detail later on. But essentially, a combination resume is your work experience plus the skills you have. It's a combination of both styles. Employers really like it. They like this format, and it also really helps when it comes to applicant tracking systems. So we, for the most part, when I go through the format and the sections of a resume, I'm going to be speaking from a combination point of view, and I do encourage you to consider, if you have a functional or a true chronological, to consider the combination style that I think is quite effective. So what makes an effective resume? Well, just to go through this list, and again, we will be covering these points in more detail as we go. But you'll see in the feedback and in the suggestions that I'm giving in the next few slides that it all more or less meets these points. So the first thing is that your skills, education, experience, and achievements are clearly evident, and the tense is consistent throughout. So past tense or present tense. And again, I'll cover that. Don't worry too much about jotting all this stuff down right now. The order consistency. So again, the order that you're placing the information from left to right on your page. I will be breaking this down later on when I give you some examples, but essentially you want the flow to be similar for each section. You really want to make sure that the recruiter does not have to dig or search for the information, because if you remember back the paragraph that you read that prompted you to sign up for this webinar, it really is about how to grab their attention in the first few seconds, because initially a recruiter or human resources, they will scan the resume in about 6 to 8 seconds. They know exactly where they're looking. They're pretty skilled that way. And if they don't get what they need in those first few seconds, and there's a pile of resumes left to review, you might end up in the no pile. We want to get you in the yes pile, and the yes pile just means they'll come back. They'll revisit your resume in more detail to establish if you have what it is they need to be shortlisted, and then eventually moved into an interview invite. So we want to grab their attention early on. So we want the tense and the order of your information to be relatively consistent throughout the document so that they are not tirelessly searching for information. Customized and relevant for the position that you're applying for. I put a little asterisk there because I do spend a little bit of time on some effective strategies in order to customize your resume. Yes, each and every time, right? Each and every time you're applying to a job posting. An effective resume also has action words, so also known as verbs. right? Ran or run, eat, ate. And so again, we'll cover this a little bit more later on, but you want to ensure that when you're describing the impact that you had in your previous work experience or volunteer roles, or even at school, that you're describing it in a way that's very active, very proactive. Whenever possible, try to quantify your experience. So, include some numbers in there, some percentages, some dollar signs. Those kinds of characters really stand out in a sea of letters, which is essentially what your resume is, just a whole bunch of letters. So if you have some dollar amounts or some percentage, some number characters kind of sprinkled throughout your resume, you're really going to attract the eye. You are, and I want to say this if there's any recruiters listening, but you are manipulating the eye to go to that information, right? And then, of course, and we'll cover this a little later on, but your presentation of the document itself, there really ought to be a really nice ratio of black, which is the letters, and maybe some numbers, and white space. So the white space that's left on the document, it really needs to have a nice ratio. So not completely inundated with words and letters, but a really nice flow. Again, you really want to ensure that the recruiter or the human resources or whoever it is reading it wants to read it. If it looks like it's too much work and it's not broken up with really nice clear headings and maybe some bullets and so forth, then it might just be too much to take in, and it might end up in the no pile. So make sure it has a really nice black and white consistency or ratio. Okay, so this is where we're going to be spending a little bit more time. I'm going to break down each section of the resume. Now, the order of the resume isn't necessarily always going, the order of your resume isn't always necessarily going to be in the order that I discussed this with, but you will take away from this, if you haven't already, that customizing it means moving headings up and down the page depending on who the reader is. So I'm going to be going through it in a format or in an order that I think is most relevant to a student. Okay. First section, we have your personal information. So of course that includes your name, possibly your city. I'll come back to that in a sec. Your telephone number and your professional email address. I've seen some doozies, so make sure that it's a professional email address that that you're sending out there on your resume. It's kind of part of your brand, isn't it? Your header section up there at the top. So the design that you choose with your name, phone number, city, email address, the way that it looks and the format really ought to be the same. It really ought to be consistent for each of the documents that you are putting together for your application. So the header that's on the top of your resume really ought to be the same as the header that's on top of your cover letter, as well as the header that's on top of your reference sheet. Now going back to city, you can leave it off. You certainly don't need your full address on your resume. There's no need for them to know that, but your city might be really helpful. So if you're living in Surrey and the employer that you're targeting is also in Surrey, then slap Surrey back on there. It should, you want to let the employer know that you live within that community or within that city. Yeah, so that's kind of my 2 cents on the city bit. So there you have it. The next section, and this is what makes a combination resume a combination resume. We then have a summary section or a qualification section or a profile, really whatever you want to call it. But it's the screening section. So that's where you take the qualifications of the job and you reference it right up here in the profile section of the resume. I'm going to give you a sample. I'm going to give you an example rather of that. So it's a summary of your abilities that are directly related to the position that you're applying for. Okay, directly related. It's a nice combination of hard and soft skills. We're going to talk about what those are for those of you that aren't entirely sure, but it's a good combination of hard and soft skills. You can have it either in short paragraph format with maybe a couple of bullets at the bottom, or you can do it entirely in a bulleted list. If you choose to list your summary of skills or your qualifications or highlights, whatever you want to call that section, if you choose to do it in bulleted section, 4 to 6 points, maximum 8 points is what I would suggest. Now, this section is like your mini resume. It's the VIP section. Only the good stuff should go there. Okay, and it's like a mini resume in that if they continue reading your resume, they will find they will find kind of confirmation of that information that you placed in your summary section. You will confirm it throughout the document. For example, if you put as one of your first bullets that you have a Bachelor of Business Administration with in accounting or whatever it might be, and then I scroll down to your education section, I will see, yep, there it is, and they got it from Kwantlen Polytechnic, and here are some of the courses. But I'm just giving them like a little taste. I'm kind of wetting their palate of the skills that I have. It's confirmed with the rest of my document, but I'm just pulling out yummy little tidbits for the employer to view and to scan in the first 6 seconds to entice them to continue reading the document. Okay, so it's really like a mini resume. The rest, it can be supported with the content that's in the rest of the document, but you're just pulling out really important points to encourage them to read on. I have examples of all of these things. And then your education section, feel free to include relevant coursework here. Okay, you don't just have to list your degree or diploma or certificate, the school, your expected graduation date or your graduation date, and then leave it there. Feel free to add a few things, especially if you're a student with limited work experience. You really want to build on this education section. So don't leave your ego at the door. Bring it in and be proud of everything you accomplished while you were a student. Let's have a look at what this might look like. Okay, so here we have a header. And so as you can see, this is a sample using me. So we have my name, my phone number, my email address, my LinkedIn URL. If I was applying to a position in a particular city, then that I live in, then I would include my city in there as well. One thing you'll notice is I then kind of divide it up by with a line going across the page, a horizontal line, and then the job title. This is a really effective way for the recruiter to know immediately the type of work you're looking for. Now, this is almost like your thesis. Okay, so if you're telling me with this document that you're applying for an accounting assistant position, I then expect to see the rest of the document support that. Kind of like if you're going to be a new social science students, you know what I'm talking about when it comes to having a thesis and then having the essay support whatever that thesis is, right? So you start off with the concept and then you support it with the rest of the document. And that's essentially what we're going to be doing by putting the job title that you're applying to up there at the top, right below the header. And yes, feel free to keep that attached to your header for your cover letter and for your reference sheet. Feel free to keep the words accounting assistant or whatever job you're applying for attached to your header. The thesis continues on with the profile section. So this is our summary of skills, that mini resume area. So here I have an example, current accounting degree student with assisting experience in high volume accounts payables processing, including data entry, project coding, and payment runs. A strong client service focus with solid analytical and organizational skills. Relevant software, Excel, MS Word, so forth and so on. So what I choose to put, what I choose to tell them is really based on what the role requires. Okay, so for that employer, I'm telling them this because this is what they're looking for and this is what the role entails. But for another employer, I might focus on something else. It would, of course, still be similar, but still different terminology, different keywords. One thing to consider, the ATS or automatic tracking systems, they cannot read, well, not all of them. We'll learn that not all ATS systems are created equal, but many ATS systems cannot read information that are placed in a true header or footer on a document. So if you have your contact information, which is, hopefully you can see my cursor here, but my name all the way down to here, we might have this in a true header, right? That's where you double click up there at the top of the document and place information in a header. ATS might not be able to read that, so I do suggest just placing it in with the rest of the document in the regular body of the document. All right, more on ATSs in a little bit later on. Okay, so here we have an education example, and you'll notice going back to what makes an effective resume, consistent order or consistent formatting. So this is going to touch a little bit on that. So we have the title of our diploma, certificate, or degree, the date. Now you could put expected grad date, or you can just go ahead and put the number there. If you've graduated already, of course, that would be in the past tense. The university, so KPU is listed here. And then you'll notice that I added some relevant courses, and this should be relevant to the employer that I'm targeting. I also make reference to my soft skill, and I kind of support that. So it's not just a claim, I actually support it. So here is how I developed some teamwork skills through applied group projects and active participation on the KPU volleyball team. And then I also listed some awards here. So here in 2020, I won the Elgin Math Award, and in 2021, I won the Reynolds Stewart Science Award. Don't panic if you haven't won any of these awards. I've completely made them up for fun. So there you go. So again, just going back to this, remember the formatting. So the most important thing here is the title of your degree, certificate, or diploma, followed by the university. All right, so next section, after we have our header and our summary section, which is the skills and maybe a brief profile, and then our education, we then go into our work experience or volunteer experience. An option for you here is to combine these two sections, work and volunteer, and just perhaps call it work experience. And then when you actually write out the information under that, then you can let them know which of those positions is volunteer and which were just regular paid work experience. Or you can break up these sections entirely and have two separate sections, work experience and then volunteer experience. So again, with any resume format you choose, it's always in reverse chronological order, which means the most recent experience comes first. It's not the most relevant experience that comes first for these sections. If you find that your older work experience is more relevant than your newer work experience, you know what? This is not math. It doesn't have to be exact. So you might then choose to take your work experience and divide it into two sections: relevant work experience, where you have that more relevant but older work experience, and then other work experience that then highlights your more recent but not as relevant work experience. If you choose to take that off because it's not relevant, you do risk having large gaps in your resume dates. So I would encourage you to put it on, just perhaps downplay it a little bit. And then, of course, you do want to, when you're describing what you did in your previous roles, whether it's work experience or volunteer experience, you do want to list them as accomplishments rather than just simply listing what you were paid to do or what you were asked to do as a volunteer. And we will get into that in a little bit more detail a little later on. So again, do not just simply tell them what it was you were paid to do, right? Expand a little bit more on that. So here we have an example of work experience or volunteer experience. So here I have done a combination where I've combined my work experience and my volunteer experience sections into one. So same thing with the consistency of the education. We have the job title. We have the job title here first, similar to how we would have a degree or diploma title. Then below that, we have the employer or the company. And then we also have the date. So you'll notice here that this is a place that I am still working at. And if I'm still working at Winners, then I would make sure to tell them, you know, what I do in the present tense. So if you imagine having the personal pronoun I on your resume, which you would not physically put on your resume because there's no personal pronouns on a resume. However, if you imagine I starting the sentence out, I operate, I organize. Going down here to my volunteer experience, I'm no longer there, so I welcomed. Okay, so there we have the good active verb in the present tense if we're still there, and in the past tense if we're no longer there. You'll notice I threw in some numbers here. I didn't just tell them that I, you know, as a sales associate at Winners, customer service, cash register, cleaning aisles, you know, folding clothing, doing inventory. I expand a little bit more on that by letting them know that I operate POS cash register, confidently handling average of 80 to 100 transactions daily. So it tells me a few things here. It tells me, first of all, that I can work under pressure. It tells me that I'm probably pretty decent at customer service or at communication. It also tells me that I'm, you know, probably pretty decent at math as well. Next one, organize shoe and handbag inventory throughout the year and prior to annual sale, which resulted in 10% higher revenue than year prior. So here I am telling you about an impact that I had in my previous experience, or in my current experience, right, because it is present. And then as an intake clerk, you'll notice here that while I am volunteering, I have a title. I have a title as a volunteer. So just putting volunteer as your title is not enough. Make sure that you use a title. If you were never really given one, make sure that you use a title that reflects what it is you did, and then check back with them, especially if they're one of your references. You want to make sure that all your information matches. So say, you know what, just considering what I did over there, would you say that it would be an intake clerk? And they'd say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, great. I'll use that term on my resume. So here I was an intake clerk, and I put in parentheses, volunteer, and I'm no longer there, and I welcome between 5 to 10 new clients daily, informing them of services to maintain an efficient flow of food distribution. So it's not just enough for me to tell them that I welcomed people, but this is what I did, and this is the impact that I had while I did it. Okay, so you'll notice back when I was describing what I did in my previous role, I very much spoke of it as an accomplishment, right? So my task was to operate a cash register, but there was way more to it than that. So what you want to do is you want to think about the task that you were responsible for in your previous position. Establish what the skill is when you're doing that task, and then think of ways that you did it and turn it into an accomplishment sentence or an accomplishment statement. And let's break that down. Okay, So we're going to start off with a power word, which is also known as a verb, right? So we're starting off with a verb. We're going to describe what we did, and then what was the result of that, right? So again, just going back to that original statement that I had under my previous, my experience rather as a sales associate. There I operate, still in the present tense, the POS cash register, confidently handling an average of 80 to 100 transactions daily. So the particular skill that I pulled out from being a sales associate, the skills are customer service, math, working under pressure, multitasking, and confidence. So these are all skills that you're demonstrating with one accomplishment sentence. Okay. Another example we have, so guided, there's our verb, right? Guided, what did you do? Campus tours for up to 1,500 prospective students, resulting in 10% increase in student enrollment from the previous year. So what are the skills that we're demonstrating here? Enthusiasm, presentation skills, customer service skills, confidence. You're probably coming up with a few more right now, even as I'm speaking, right? So accomplishment sentences. Now I find when you're looking at your resume and you're looking at your previous work experience or volunteer experience, and you're thinking back to Chantal's presentation, and you're thinking, well, how am I going to come up with this accomplishment sentence? You know what? Sometimes it helps by just looking at a list of verbs. Looking at a list of verbs. Here's a teeny tiny list of verbs. You can certainly find ones online that are way, way, way bigger, like pages and pages of verbs that are broken down into specific categories, right? Like clerical duties, customer service, communication and leadership and so forth. And then from there, read through the list of verbs, and sometimes it will kind of prompt a memory for you, and you'll be like, oh, okay, so if you just start with the verb, sometimes the rest kind of falls into place, right? So the verb, what it is you did, and the result of that, the impact that you had. Did it increase sales? Did it decrease cost? Think about it that way. So here's a very very brief list of verbs, but it might help get you started. Okay, so continuing on with our resume sections, and I'm just paying attention to the time here. So additional headings, these are optional, but they can be very effective, especially if you are a student and you have limited work experience. An awards section, you can either have it standing on its own, or you can include it in your education area. And then of course, volunteer experience almost should be on its own. Canada puts a lot of value into volunteerism, and a lot of employers really see that as something to do with your character. So I would suggest having a standalone volunteer section, but if your work experience is relatively limited, again, you might choose to merge those two areas, the work experience and the volunteer. Interests, again, optional, and preferably if it's relevant to the employer. But I remember having a conversation once a few years ago with an old client, and he had interest listed on his resume that didn't really pertain to the role, and he was applying for BC Hydro. And I said to him, well, this section here doesn't really seem relevant for what it is you're applying for. And he goes, wow, I actually did some information meetings with people at BC Hydro. I think maybe even met them at a career fair. And they were told, and he was told rather, that they really enjoy reading that section on a resume. So I said, hey, I stand corrected. Keep it on there then. So this was really great because he had done his research and he knew that for that particular employer, having an interest section, even if it doesn't really pertain to the role, is seen as quite valuable and relevant. So there you go. And then some people like to put references available upon request at the bottom of their resume. It's really not necessary to do this, so I would suggest just removing that section entirely. Okay, so let's dissect a job posting. basically you see a job posting that you're interested in. You know, what I would recommend you do, if you don't want to print out the posting, then put it up on your screen and make sure to highlight keywords. Use your highlight feature. Maybe use 2 different colors, like what are the hard skills that employer is looking for? What are the soft skills that employer, and we're going to talk about skill types in a second. So really highlight that so that you get the terminology right there on your screen. And when you're editing your resume, have that, like do a split screen and make sure that you are using those hard and soft skills, those keywords, distributing, and that they're really, your resume is really speaking to that skill set. You can also kind of do a cross-reference. So these are the qualifications that the job posting that the employer is looking for, and these are the similar kind of qualifications that I have. Oftentimes in job postings, you'll see keywords mentioned more than once. If you're seeing kind of a theme spring up from this job posting, you know, keywords seem to be repeated a few times. Make sure, of course, that those keywords are showing up in your resume as well. And then make sure that you know, don't just write down that you have these skills. Write down examples of when you used those skills. And by doing the work now of writing those skill statements now, you're actually preparing yourself for the job interview, because these short accomplishment statements can turn into really great stories in an interview, right? So you're kind of doing yourself a favor now by putting the work in now. Plus it feels good. Plus, you know, you get to see this really great summary of all these accomplishments that you didn't realize you had. So here we'll just briefly kind of touch on that. So we have, in terms of transferable skills, again, we don't necessarily want to tell the employer the specific task that we were paid to do. We want to focus a little bit more so on the skill that we learned while doing that task, right? So the transferable skill. So in this case, we're going to focus on the skill and not on the job specific task. Of course, we also want to pay attention to the hard skills. Now, these are specific teachable skills, things perhaps that you learned while you were at KPU or while you're at KPU, math skills, technical, you know, machining, CNC, and different software and so forth and so on. And of course, your soft skills. So that's you. That's kind of what makes you you, and it kind of describes how you would work with their team, how you would work at the company in the position, right? So we might have personality traits, communication skills, time management, and teamwork. So I'm going to just demonstrate how you know, you can talk about those soft skills on your resume in a deeper way than just kind of listing them. So let's go back to our education sample. So again, teamwork skills developed through applied group projects and participating on a volleyball team. So it's not just enough to simply list the skills that you have, even if they're soft skills. Tell us how you got those skills, right? So this is a really great example of how you can insert that little bit of information right there under your education. So just going back there. Okay, so here's what I'm talking about, where you might do kind of a cross-reference between what you're getting from the job posting and how you can talk about and meet those needs of the employer. So as an example, we have a job posting for a retail salesperson. So they're looking for, you know, you'll be performing customer service, retail sales. You know, you need to know the POS cash system and handling returns. So from there, you think about 3 main skill areas that you developed, you know, while you were doing these similar jobs like this. So of course, customer service and teamwork skills, very likely you form those in that kind of environment. Organizational skills, right? So if you're telling me that you're confidently handling 80 to 100 transactions in a day, you know, you need to be a relatively organized worker. You of course have cash handling skills, which equate to math skills and critical thinking as well. right? So don't focus so much on the actual task, but focus more so on the skill that you pull from those tasks. Okay, so putting it into practice. Okay, so Chantal, and I do get asked this a lot. Chantal, how do I customize my resume? My experience is going to be the same either way. So here's my answer to you. Everything that's on your resume must be truthful, but not everything should be on your resume, right? So everything that's on your resume should be truthful, must be truthful, but not everything should be on your resume. So it's up to you in terms of what you choose to tell them and how you choose to tell them what you did, right? So ways that we can customize our resume include using specific action words that demonstrate the skill set they're looking for. So we've already established the skill set they're looking for, right? We've analyzed the job posting, we've highlighted what it is they're looking for, and now we've determined, you know, that clearly this role is teamwork heavy. They are looking for someone who has that team, who can demonstrate teamwork and who can fit within their team. So we might choose words like, when we're describing what we did in our previous job or in our previous volunteer roles, or even out there at school, we might use terms like collaborated, partnered, shared. These are verbs that reflect a teamwork kind of mentality. If they're looking for someone who might lead, so you want, you know, motivation or leadership, so we might be using words like developed, initiated, led, delegated, right? If they see that if we get from the job posting that they're looking for, you know, someone who can really have an impact, you know, they're looking for someone to grow their small business, you know, or their startup company. So they're looking for words like increased, decreased, and grew, right? So here's where we can customize it each and every time. So again, everything that's on your resume should be truthful, but not everything should be on your resume. So focus more so on what you did that is relevant to the employer. And you want to adjust the terminology in a way that reflects their need, right? The header placement. So again, you might find that your volunteer experience is probably the most relevant thing to that employer. If that's the case, then the next section after your summary section really ought to be your volunteer experience, right? Or if they're looking for an intern, then the focus is primarily on your education. You're going to make sure to have your education section first, right? So header placement and terminology. So again, the choice of verbs that you choose and so forth, right? If they are looking for someone who is going to kind of engage, get out there, communicate with people, then you might choose to change your volunteer section to community engagement, right? So these are all little tips and suggestions, ways that you can customize each and every time so that the reader is really feeling like you wrote this document only for them, right? They're so special. You wrote it only for them. Okay, so the applicant tracking system, we're going to keep this, we're going to move through this next bit relatively quickly, but the applicant tracking system, make it simple but significant, and that's key. Simplicity is key when it comes to the applicant tracking software. This is a software that many large companies and organizations use in order to screen applicants, in order to screen candidates, right? So number one, you want to keep your format simple. Avoid graphs, avoid boxes. Bullets are actually okay for applicant tracking systems, and they are an excellent way to break up your information. So keep your bullets on there. Make sure that you, again, have done your cross-reference between the job posting and your resume, and that it's very keyword, buzzword, kind of heavy, that reflects the job posting. Okay, so make sure that because many applicant tracking systems, that's how they shortlist candidates, is by, you know, do they hit the number of keywords that we're looking for? And these are the specific keywords. we are looking for. Preferably Microsoft Word. When you're uploading your document to an applicant tracking system, the preference across the board is Microsoft Word. If an ATS system states, and they always will tell you which format they prefer, if it states Word or PDF, please choose Word. It is still easier for an applicant tracking system to read the content in a Word document more so than a PDF. Finally, not all ATS systems are created equal. So you'll find that some ATS systems are simply there to categorize resumes for recruiters. They don't do any keyword searches or anything along those lines, whereas some only search for keywords before they'll shortlist candidates that hit the exact number of keywords or the minimum number of keywords that they're looking for. So generally speaking, if you stick with the format, the simple format, if you stick with making sure the keywords are in there that match the job posting, that match the company and industry terminology, and you're going with Microsoft Word, for the most part, this will work for most ATS systems, if not all. Okay, so while they're not all created equal, by using the tips that I very briefly outlined for you right now, it's very likely that that whatever ATS the company is using will work for you. So one thing you want to think about is, say you're in a new neighborhood, you just moved here, you're craving sushi, you want to go out, but you have no idea where's a good sushi place, right? Nice fresh sushi. So you're going to automatically, you're probably going to go to Google and you're going to type in keywords, right? You're going to type in sushi and fresh and best and Surrey and wild salmon. And then you're going to look for, for the listing from there. And ATS is kind of similar, right? It searches for keywords. It searches for candidates that meet the keyword requirements that it has. So if you're pulling out keywords from the job posting like Excel, spreadsheet, data, Richmond, right? If the employer's in Richmond, then you put that, and you live in Richmond, make sure to put that in there. So here we have entered sales data into Excel spreadsheet to determine monthly revenue. So covered some there. Analyze data to determine lower revenue months, helping sales team determine sales action marketing plans. So it's really about reworking and rewording what it is you tell an employer. Okay, so a few things we've already covered here. So avoiding the personal pronouns, so no I, me, my on a resume. Use straightforward, clear, and simple language. Make sure that you're using the appropriate tense. If you're not there anymore, then it's past tense. And remember, just imagine the personal pronoun I being there, right? Start each sentence with a good, strong power word, also known as a verb. Great lists you can find online and customize each and every time. Few layout tips, so 1 to 2 pages only. For students with limited work experience, 1 page is fine, it's ideal. References are on a separate piece of paper and they're usually not given until around the interview time. Depending on your font style, and you want to keep your font style, to more traditional fonts like Calibri, Arial, Tahoma, Times New Roman if you're a traditionalist, but anywhere between 10 to 12 points. And make sure it's easy to read. You have a good ratio of black to white. You've labeled your sections clearly. If you don't have MS Word, then just use Google Docs and then you can convert it to MS Word directly from there. And make sure you have the same font consistent throughout the entire document. All right. Don't hit send until you've asked yourself these questions. Will this info or will this line get me an interview for this particular job? If the answer is no, you probably don't need it on there, or you don't need it so high on your resume. Can a reader tell in the first 6 seconds what you're applying for? Does the first third of the page entice the reader to read on? Did I get another set of eyes to look at it to avoid any grammar or spelling mistakes? And am I eating enough veggies and protein? I mean, the last one's not relevant to a resume, but you should ask yourself that question regularly anyway. Finally, keep it updated. right? A resume should grow and change along with you and your career journey. So have a master resume that you're constantly adding to, that you can pull information from each time you want to write a customized resume. And I'll leave it open now for questions. Michelle, are you noticing any questions in the chat?
Yes, I have one here from Hira Matharu. So she says, let's say I completed an arts degree and then an IT degree, and I'm applying for an IT job. Should the arts degree be stated in the education section?
Yeah, I mean, you can certainly put that in there, but again, that's optional. So I would probably just focus on the IT degree, but there might have been some things that you accomplished while you did your arts degree that you want to make sure you have on there, right? So if there are specific courses you took that you think would be relevant, then I might suggest leaving your arts degree on in that case. But it isn't necessary to keep your arts one on there. But with arts, you develop so many great skills, so many transferable skills, that my suggestion would be to leave it on, but to include, relevant courses that you think that employer would appreciate.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Chantal. I have another question here from Julian Del Mundo. What is the maximum number of pages for a resume?
Yeah, so if you're relatively new-ish to the working world, like, you have about 5 years of work experience or less, chances are you can get away with a one-page resume. Generally speaking, it's expected that you don't go back further than, and I don't think I'd have anyone necessarily on this webinar that would go beyond 10 or 15 years. But if you have 10 plus years experience, then you might need a full two-pager. Generally speaking, I wouldn't go beyond 2 pages, though.
Perfect. The next question here is from Carla. Can we have a copy of the presentation? Is that something that you would be willing to share, Chantal?
Oh, a copy of the presentation?
Yeah, the PowerPoint.
Yeah, I could certainly upload it to Career Connection.
Okay, perfect. But if other than the presentation, the video itself, the video recording, Carla, it will be available on the website, so you can watch that anytime after this. Give us maybe a few hours to download and also upload on YouTube. But once everything's up, it should be available on the website.
Yeah.
Fatima here, can I send you my resume for feedback? I think Chantal can quickly plug our resume review service.
Absolutely. Yeah, Fatima, of course you can. So if you go on to, you can even just Google KPU resume review, and there is a page where you can upload your resume, and it does come to me. But that's the preferred format. There it is. Thank you. Thanks, Michelle. Michelle just posted that link there, so you can upload your resume there, and I will review it, stick in some suggested edits, and then send it back to you via email.
Okay, I have another here from Guntas. As a fresher, I guess freshman, who has no work experience and has just started with health science degree, what job should I go for without work experience?
Yeah, I mean, certainly at this point, volunteering might be a really great option for you. There's certainly a lot of entry-level positions that you could consider with any of the health authorities, so Vancouver Coastal Health or Fraser Health. Have a look on their website. There might be some relevant entry-level positions just to kind of get you in the system and to get you kind of familiar with the process and to be in that kind of environment. But you can also volunteer. You might find that you're able to, through volunteering, get more skill development done through that way. So specific jobs, I don't know if I would necessarily list those, but certainly go on the Fraser Health Authority or the Vancouver Coastal Health, Providence Health Authority as well, or Providence Health rather, and just see for some entry-level positions, again, just to immerse yourself in that environment, but also consider volunteering as well.
Thanks, Chantal. Bradley Wells has a question. Should I have a separate section for skills before work experience, or just find a way to add the skills to the work experience?
Yeah, so that's that summary section up there at the top of the resumes, right? So you have your header, which is your name and your contact information. Then you're going to have a summary section. So how you format this section is completely up to you. You can have a short paragraph with a few bullets in addition, or you can just do it in bulleted list, or you can just do a profile summary. That's your skill section. And you also want to make sure your skills are sprinkled throughout your work experience and anything else that follows.
Thank you. Amrit has a question. Can we add a portfolio on resume? I guess maybe attach your portfolio. I think that's your question, Chantal.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. I actually didn't mention that on my webinar, but yes, if you have a link to an online portfolio, put that on there. Oh, for sure. Right in your header. Right in your header.
Awesome. Hira Matharu has a question. Should there be a career objective at the top of the resume? I think you mentioned something about this one earlier.
Yeah, so I wouldn't suggest having an objective per se, kind of like the way we used to see it on resumes to obtain the full-time customer service position with ABC Corporation. I wouldn't have that. I would just make it nice and simple. So right after the header, you can have the job title that you're applying for, and then that summary section, right? Or if you didn't want the job title standing on its own, you can refer to yourself as that job title in your summary. For example, I might write something like a professional career coach with over 15 years of experience delivering blah, 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 right? So I refer to myself as that job title in my summary section.
Perfect. I have here a few thank yous from the students. So yes, thank you everyone. Thank you. And they're all thanking you, Chantal. Carla here has a question. Can we schedule a mentor wherein they can oversee your resume? And I think this is for the career advising service that we do have. I can share the link right now if you want.
Yeah, so was it Carla?
Carla, yeah.
Yeah, so Carla, if you want, yeah, you can certainly make an appointment with a career coach, which is usually me through Advisor Connect. I think Michelle's going to share that link in just a second. There it is. But we don't do mentorship per se, but there's certainly, I love the idea of mentorship. So, if you're in a certain industry, then I would suggest spending part of your time as a student looking for mentorship programs.
I guess we have just a few more minutes to answer questions. It's already 1:04, but let's just take advantage of this. Guntas has a question here. How many skills should we add in a resume?
Yeah, so again, that really depends on the position itself, and it depends on what you know about the requirements of the position. But generally speaking, if again you've chosen to put that skills section up there at the top of your resume, if you're just doing bullets, you want to have about maximum 8 bullet points, and there can be a combination of skills there. But rather than just list all the skills you have, just make sure that they really do reflect the needs of the position itself. So, you want to stick with listing the hard skills, so the job specific skills, and a combination of a few soft skills. Don't overdo it with the soft skills, especially.
Okay, and I guess we're at the very end here. Amrit has a very nice message, Chantal. She said, "This is the best webinar I attended so far." So thank you.
Oh, great.
That's amazing. Thank you, everyone. I think that's it.
Great. Thanks, everyone. I'll see whoever's coming tomorrow for interviews. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Again, the recording is going to be on the website, hopefully before the end of the day. If not, earliest should be at least tomorrow morning. So, yeah, I'll see everyone tomorrow.